Howdy, and welcome to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Nord, where we cover a mix of current events, politics, and the law. Take it away, Warren.
Welcome back to White Hat Law. My name is Warren Nord with Nord Law, and we practice law in downtown Arlington, but we're here at the beautiful Wells Fargo Tower with my good friends, the sheriff, the most popular politician in town. I shouldn't say politician, the most popular lawman in town, certainly. Bill Wayburn, and I've known Bill since way back when we were doing karate work with Roy Kerbin.
That's right.
Back in the day. So, Air Force, Chief of Police, DWG, been here a while, well connected with the community, which we'd like to see. And also here we have today William Stevens. I've known William for about a dozen years or so, law school, at a law school here close by. Who practices immigration and assorted other things. And so today we're going to first talk about the history of immigration in the current family separation matter, and then we'll talk about what we're doing here in Tarrant County with the sheriff, and then we'll talk more about a more general discussion of immigration and how a lawyer can help you or help you along with those kinds of matters. So let's start real quick with William. Tell us how we got to this. The big deal is we separate kids that coming across the border and they never see their kids again, and then what happens then? So tell us about that.
Well, there's certainly a lot of passion and emotions around this thing, but when someone crosses the U.S. border, anyone, doesn't matter, American or otherwise, it's a violation if you don't check in at the port of entry. It's a Class B misdemeanor. All right, so it's
now what's a port of entry?
Port of entry is where CBP is, where Border Patrol is. This is where the U.S. Customs and Border Protection has staff to check you in, check your passport, make sure you're not carrying drugs or illegal contraband, food you shouldn't have, anything like that. All the things that we've decided are not safe for the country, including terrorists and whatever the list is.
Okay.
That's the port of entry. So ports of entry are along the border are things like Brownsville, El Paso. So all on the border are ports of entry. Most international airports are ports of entry. So you check in there. Okay. Now, if you're an American, you check in, give them your passport, they wave you in. If you're from another country, you show your visa. If you're from another country and don't have a visa and you're seeking asylum, then that's where you would ask for asylum. There is another place you can enter, which is not at the port of entry. And that is where the illegal action comes in. That's where you've committed the Class B misdemeanor. At that point, you've entered illegally, what some people call undocumented workers, other people call illegal aliens, what the statute refers to as entered without inspection.
Entered what?
Entered without inspection, so no one knows you're here.
Okay.
Okay? So what we say is just EWI, EWI, entered without inspection.
Okay.
Okay? Takes all the passion out from the two sides about what's what.
It's hard to spin that.
Yes, it's hard to spin that. Enter without inspection, which is what the statute says. So at that point, you have violated U.S. law. You're subject to a fine and up to 6 months in jail for the first offense. And the second offense is up to 2 years in jail for entering the border, for crossing the border illegally. So that is basically what's going on. You've committed a crime. Law enforcement officer, if they apprehend you, will arrest you and process that. What a lot of people then do at that point is then they ask for asylum, which is a little bit backwards. If they wanted asylum, they could have asked for it at the port of entry and not risked all the dangers of crossing. Most of the places where you can cross, where there is no port of entry, aren't very hospitable. They're dangerous. And if you're taking children with you, you're putting those children's lives in danger as well.
What is asylum actually, though? How do I? Am I just because I've opined about this on Facebook and I said asylum has to be more than my country sucks more than yours, and I want to be in yours.
Well, yeah, it sucks to live where I live isn't not asylum. So
Okay.
asylum is a treaty that most countries in the world have signed on to. It's political asylum. So in the Cold War days, you think, I'm a spy. I made it over to the United States. I want to get out of my communist country. First thing I do when I get to the embassies, I ask for asylum. So you can have asylum because you have political issues. You can have asylum because you are in fear for your life because of your religion or your nationality. But there is no asylum just because I don't like where I live. That's not what asylum is for.
You hear that people are being taught the magic words of I'm fear for my life if I go back or something like that.
Well, that is certainly part of it. There has to be a determination of credible fear. So in other words, does the person really believe that they're in trouble if they go back? Then the second part of that is, what is the fear driven from? What causes it? If it's political or religious in nature, and it's because the government won't or can't protect you, then you may be eligible for asylum.
Well, that's good to clear that up. But it appears as though an administration, this is one of those places where an administration that belongs to one president might react in a different way and be more forgiving or more welcoming than another administration.
It's possible, but the president isn't going to be making the decision about an asylum case. Most cases will be an asylum officer at the border, and if they don't believe that the asylum is appropriate, then they'll refer it to an immigration court, and an immigration judge will make that decision.
So, and then the other complaint that I hear is, well, there's so many people seeking asylum that we have people that are hanging out at the ports of entry for days and days and days, and they're not getting in, and so they abandon hope, and then they go around the system.
Well, as with any process, the system is there for a reason. You can't cut line anymore in the movies because you don't want to wait than you can anywhere else. The United States didn't create these problems that they're fleeing. Now, we are obviously the wealthiest country in the world. We can probably do more to help these people, but just because we signed on to the treaty doesn't necessarily mean that we have to turn into the savior of the world and solve everyone's problems. But even if we did, we can't do it by letting them break the rules and circumvent all of the processes. Now, if there's too many people in one place, then the U.S. government has fairly reasonably asking, give them time to respond to that. Don't fix the problem yourself.
Okay.
I don't think there's any jurisdictions in the United States that are really into self-help.
Right, right. Well, that's good. Now, so we've kind of went through some of this, but it appears as though we've kind of all of a sudden developed this bigger problem, and now the family separation has turned into an issue. Give us some background on how that developed, if you could.
So the issue of family separation is, I won't say it's a. So back in the 80s, we had a lot of kids coming into the country. They were unaccompanied minors. They were showing up from
like 6 or 16?
Anywhere between.
Okay.
Sometimes with siblings, sometimes alone. And they would make their way up here for any number of reasons. Gangs, no work, lack of food, whatever the reason was that drove them north. They all came north. No, they didn't stop in Mexico, though, because they didn't really want to go to Mexico. They really wanted to come here.
Because Mexico only sucks a little bit less than where they are.
Exactly.
They want to go where it sucks the least.
They want to come to the shining gem of Colombia. So they arrived, and there was a lot more than anyone expected, because this wasn't anything we were looking for. And at this time it was INS. INS didn't know what to do with them, so they just found some temporary facilities and did what they could under the circumstances. Well, they got sued. The lawsuit took 10 years to get resolved, so by the late 90s they had a settlement. The suit was Flores, that was the people that brought the plaintiff. So the settlement was, you can't put kids in there and those kinds of facilities for more than 20 days. After that, you need to get them, essentially you need to get them either to family members or to Health and Human Services, or to some government contractor who's providing some similar facility. That stayed like that until 2015 or so. And Obama said, these kids aren't showing up by themselves unaccompanied. Now they're showing up with their parents, which is a secondary problem, because those parents are bringing somebody across illegally. They've now committed 2 crimes.
Right.
So they were coming with their parents, and Obama said, well, okay, they did commit a crime, and they ought to be prosecuted, but because of the way the system works, they're going to be turned around and sent back out. There's no reason to separate them from their kids. That's just not necessary. So we'll keep them all together. The people that brought the Flores suit said, hey, we got a settlement with the government, and they're violating it. Those kids cannot be in detention. So the government was
even if they're with her,
right? Because their parents are in detention,
right?
So they're faced with the choice of, do I just let the whole family out, right?
Right.
Or do I separate the kids? So now, when someone's arrested and they go to jail with or without their kids, if they want out of jail, they have 2 things they can do. They can go to in front of a magistrate, have him set a bail, post a bond, and then leave. If the magistrate feels that they're trustworthy enough and that the bond's sufficient. Otherwise, they stay in detention, in incarceration until their case is heard. And then they're either decided, adjudicated guilty or innocent, and they're either let go or they're further confined.
Right.
So in the case of these families who are coming across the border, they've committed, usually if the parents came with them, now they've committed 2 crimes. They are going to go in front of a judge. The judge is going to hear their case. If he finds that they do have a legitimate asylum claim, then they're free to enter the country. If not, they'll be put on a bus and sent back to wherever their home country is. Repatriated is the proper term. So in that case, what is law enforcement supposed to do with the children?
Right.
What would they do if it was a domestic case, it was a DUI, say somebody was crazy enough to go out and burglar a house and take their kids with them? It doesn't really matter what they're doing. If you get arrested,
a little drug possession and exchange for money while they got their kids in the backyard.
You're going to have the kids taken away because the parent's going to be jailed.
Right.
Until the jail issue is resolved, either through bond or through the case being concluded. That's just how law enforcement works in the United States. And as far as I know, it's how it works in every country. So the question now is, well, so a lot of people are committing the same crime, so we should just ignore it?
Right.
Most people who are the detractors of the policy are saying, well, you can give them ankle bracelets. They come up with all these ideas, right? But what they're really suggesting is that we treat this crime differently than all the other crimes and ask law enforcement to have a special process for this versus everything else that they do.
Right.
Why?
Right. Well, that's interesting. So, so what would it take to simply say, no, you're incarcerated, and your children we're going to keep with you, so we're not going to do the separation, but we're not going to let you go?
Well, that's the interesting part, because what Obama said was, look, let's just go ahead and keep them together. Then they got sued. They said, you can't do that. That's not what the deal was. Now, the elephant in the room that nobody wanted to admit, but I'll just go ahead and let it out. What they were hoping was they would just say, well, just let them all go.
Right.
Right? Just release them into the general population, let them run around the country and do whatever they want. But you're not going to have much law enforcement if you just let people go just because they happen to commit a crime with kids.
Right.
Imagine, you already have a due process problem there, right? This guy who's not smart enough to get married and have kids, or in a lot of these people's cases, they may or may not be married, but they have kids. The guy that doesn't have children gets treated differently.
Right.
Doesn't make sense. So that was what the goal was. But the Ninth Circuit said, well, I agree, they can't keep the kids, but there's nothing in the agreement that says the parents have to be released. So it's the Ninth Circuit that ordered the separation, not Obama, not Trump, not the police.
Right.
It's the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now come full circle to modern time, and more people are showing up. There's more problems down there in Central America, and there's more issues. Trump's just following along with what he's supposed to do. The reason it's coming up now is because he has a zero tolerance policy for anyone coming across the border. Everyone that comes across gets arrested if they're apprehended.
Right. So
it's not a matter of quality, it's quantity.
Well, what if Trump were to say, well, we're going to challenge the Ninth Circuit, take it to the Supreme Court, or just break it and say, sue me again, and we'll fight all
the Ninth
over it?
Circuit isn't wrong. There is a Flores settlement agreement. It was a settlement agreement. It wasn't a ruling. It was just an agreement. The government agreed to it, and the plaintiffs agreed to it, and it was done. All the Ninth Circuit was saying was that is what the agreement says. You can't just ignore the agreement. This is the rule of law here. You make a contract, you stick with it, unless it gets modified.
Yeah, but it's not a treaty that Senate ratified. There has to be a way to amend the law.
Well, there is.
So
it's called the United States Congress. The United States Congress could fix this problem like that. Right now, there are several legislative suggestions that are being bandied about.
Right.
Cruz has put one in, Cornyn has put one in, Feinstein's put one in, although frankly hers isn't very helpful. It basically
That's what a surprise.
Feinstein says you can't keep kids with their parents. Again, being the elephant being, let's not talk about it, but what we really want is just to let everybody go.
Right.
So
what does Cruz want to do?
Cruz wants to have a facility, basically detention that has facilities for families,
Okay.
which is similar to what Cornyn wants and what probably most people want. Now, what Trump did was he said, listen, okay, fine, you guys want that? I'm going to issue a presidential order saying, essentially inviting Congress to do their job.
Right.
And by the way, I'm going to tell DOD, hey, you got any leftover buildings, facilities, Quonset huts, whatever, give them to DHS or HHS and let them do what they need to do to take care of these kids. In the meantime, they've done a fairly decent job, either through private contractors or through government facilities of giving these kids places to stay. And it's not like they're in jails.
Right.
It's not quite like they're in summer camp, but it's something clearly in between.
Right.
And the one thing that I think everyone forgets is we didn't cause this problem.
Right.
No one put
But
out
we're
an
expected to take
invitation
care
to
of
have
it,
everybody
yeah.
come here.
Yeah.
And you can't throw out our laws because we don't like them. If you don't like a law, you pass a new one.
Right.
You don't just ignore it.
That's one of my favorite things about President Trump. You know, I was not initially a big Trump fan, and he certainly routinely says things that you gotta go, well, I'm not sure that's necessary, but I've learned just to fly at 35,000 feet and just
Yes.
look at what happens. You know, and he often is saying, Congress, you got to do your job here. I'm just boss. I am not here to run. My secretary is not going to run all of the world, which is what everybody expects him to do with the administrative state. So
And we can't just ignore a law because we don't like it.
Right.
Remember Nixon tried to do that way back when, if anybody remembers him. I forgot what the statute was now, but he just said he just didn't like it and wasn't going to do it. And the argument always is, so law enforcement every day, I'm sure the chief can attest to this,
Sheriff
has to make
now.
sheriff,
Got it.
has to make decisions about what they're going to enforce and what they're not going to enforce. Right? That's just prosecutorial discretion. But if you just decide I'm not going to enforce it because I don't like it, imagine if we said, you know what, I'm a beat cop and I don't really care if people jaywalk or not. In fact, I think they have the constitutional right to cross the street anywhere they want. Okay, that's not prosecutorial discretion. That's just you deciding you're not going to enforce a law.
right.
Okay, beat cop does it, not so bad. What if the entire police force decides that the police chief says, no, I personally don't like jaywalking citations. I think people should be able to cross anywhere they want. He's not using discretion. He's decided he doesn't want to enforce the law. And there's a difference.
Absolutely.
So we expect law enforcement to enforce the law. That's why they
That's
wear
a good
gun and
note.
a
So
badge.
what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. Thank you for that rundown, and we're going to talk to law enforcement about what they're doing to solve the world's problems here in Tarrant County. So we'll be right back in a second.
Whoa, hang on to your hat, folks. More with Warren Nord when we get back. Y'all are back here listening to the White Hat Law Show. Warren, who do we have up next?
And welcome back. Okay, now we're going to hear from Sheriff Bill Wayburn, who's going to tell us what Tarrant County is doing. You know, there's some metropolitan areas in the country that are known as, we call them sanctuary cities. And some people say, I don't know what that means, but it just means that they're going to be lax when it comes to immigration and illegal immigrants in some way or form or fashion. And sometimes it's more formal than other times, but it just means that you kind of put out the welcome mat and say, we're not going to enforce the rules in a way that people kind of expect us to. So, Sheriff, tell us what's going on in Tarrant County.
What we're doing in Tarrant County is that we have collaborated with ICE for the purpose of this, is that to hold people fully responsible for their actions. And what that means is what it looks like from a practical standpoint is that we have agents that are trained along with ICE, and they're inside our jail. These are not people out in the field, they're inside our jail in the brick and mortar. And if someone gets arrested in the community, whether it be for DWI on up to murder, as they come into our jail and they're booked in, and part of the process is they're booked in, they see one of our people who we refer to as 287G officers, and they check their immigration status. And if they are illegally in the country, then they have the authority to put a detainer on them, and that detainer goes up and there's an administrative warrant that's signed to keep that person for ICE. Now they still have to go through the process, they're arraigned for their state charges, that state charge is adjudicated. But for instance, if they make bond on the DWI, we call ICE, and ICE comes and picks them up, and then they go and they get held accountable for that portion of it. But mainly what we're doing is that if somebody comes in we make sure that they're fully held accountable, and we're doing that 24/7. So hopefully nobody falls through the cracks. And people often throw a little bit of rocks at us and say, you're separating families. Well, we separate a lot of families when
Right.
we enforce the law. And two is that in that is the people that we're holding are, for instance, our last snapshot at it is that the rundown is simple. That we've got 9 murderers, we've got 71 major drug dealers, we have 68 for aggravated sexual assault of a child, we've got 13 for aggravated assault on a child, numerous robbery suspects, several burglary suspects, and about 70 or 80 DWIs. That's the people that we have these detainers on. And our position is we don't want them back in the neighborhoods. And we don't want to let them back. And the truth be known, even in the neighborhoods that there is a large illegal population, most of those people don't want them back in their neighborhoods.
Right.
These are bad people.
Right.
And so we're just assisting to make sure that they get out of there. We are the largest urban county in the United States that is under this program, that is this aggressive at it.
Okay, so the 287G is a federal. It refers to a federal law, and so the feds come in and they train a select number of people who you refer to as the 287G.
That's right.
How'd you call it? Employee or
They're jailers.
Jailers, and they're the ones that are particularly trained to handle this issue.
Yes, sir.
And so, give us as long as you're here, give us a rundown on the sheriff's department. How many people are you holding in jail at any given time?
This morning we had about 4,000 people in jail.
Okay, so you had 4,000. How many of those do you know or how many do you suspect are illegal aliens?
About 375.
So 10%.
10% of the jail.
And that's about normal?
That's about normal.
Okay. And of that 370, that's the rundown you just gave me a minute ago.
Yes, sir.
That's the composition of that. So how long have you been doing this program?
Well, we have, when I first came into office in January of 17, we started the process. I'd already talked to ICE and we started the process. We actually implemented the training last summer, so we've been into it about a year.
And what do you think about it? I mean, obviously it has an impact.
It has an impact, and what we've seen is that we think we'll continue to see our detainers and our warrants go up on those people, and we're going to make sure that they leave the country. Now, some of them are going to serve prison terms of 15, 20 years before they're deported.
Yeah, I go back and forth on this. Can we not get them out and do something that says these guys can't come back in? But of course they started off with that. And they got in, so it's the old biblical when you send somebody out of the country, exile. We can't do exile anymore. That would have been great. The idea of how much do we pay a day for somebody in jail?
Well, right now it probably costs us somewhere around $55 a day for somebody to be in our jail.
Okay, so $50. It's real money.
It's real money.
But if they're out rampaging in our neighborhood, that's real money too, and that's real lives.
And real lives are being threatened and that kind of thing. And one of the concerns that I have is with our porous borders right now, if we send them back,
right,
we'll see them right back.
Right. So again, we're housing Mexico's problems. We're somebody's south.
Yeah, somebody's south, but we have people from all over the world under that detainer.
Well, okay, so you have roughly 370, and are all of them Hispanic, or some of them Hispanic? Or
some of them are Hispanic. Probably about 58 to 60% of that population is Hispanic, and some of those Hispanics are going to be from Venezuela, and Colombia.
Yeah, it goes all the way south.
All the way south. But we're also going to have probably Cubans there. We're going to have some other folks there from the Middle East. We're going to have people from Eastern Europe there. So they come from assorted places from across the world.
It's mind-boggling. We're going to talk about the overstayed visas and things like that in a minute. Well, let's talk about that. If somebody's overstayed their visa, do they count as
They can count. They absolutely can count.
And do you happen to know that offhand? How many of those would
I
be?
don't know the offhand number of how many people are that. Now, we in the jail may not necessarily, it's an overstayed visa. What it's going to do is pop up that they got an immigration hold that needs to be put on them. Is what we'll be doing.
And would that be, that's still going to be for somebody who's a felony, right? It's not a...
High misdemeanors or felonies.
Okay.
This is not traffic stops.
Right. So what other things do we need to know about that Tarrant County is doing in this arena or wants to do?
Well, what we want to do, or what we might do moving forward, is that we've talked to ICE and trying to be compassionate of keeping people here until they see, instead of being shipped off to an ICE facility somewhere else in the country, is we may do a memo of understanding where they actually stay in the Tarrant County Jail until everything's disposed of so that they can stay near their families. And that means that the family can come in and visit them and they can be nearby.
So, I guess that could create capacity for the federal system.
Yes, it does.
And certainly it handles this temporary bubble, and that when people are all coming at one time, and you see an explosion. Yeah, you said something a minute ago that was interesting to me. The people who tend to live in neighborhoods where there's a high propensity to run into an illegal alien don't want these guys in their neighborhoods either. One of the things we've always heard is we want to make sure that law enforcement is seen as a friendly face to the illegal aliens, so they'll talk to them.
That's correct.
As opposed to hiding from them because they're afraid they're going to get taken away. And it seems as though this is one of those programs that actually kind of does that.
It really does. And what the Sanctuary City problem is one of the, in talking to ICE, is we inadvertently keep ICE out of those neighborhoods because they know that everybody's coming to the jail that they want to do business with.
Right.
So they're not out in these neighborhoods. In sanctuary cities, they're going out to the neighborhoods, and what they don't understand is that then they have this plain view issue where they came after the MS-13 member, and his wife is charging them, and she's an illegal alien too, and she's arguing with them that they don't want to take them, and everybody ends up going then. And we're actually preventing that for the families.
It's interesting. That's good. I think that's marvelous work, and I applaud you, and I hope that I hope that the department gets the proper recognition for that. So when you had a comment about the going into the neighborhoods. What was that about?
So, well, what I was saying was, what the sheriff was talking about was if the local police don't help ICE, and what Tarrant County is doing is a big service to the community, because if ICE doesn't have help from the local police, they have to go in themselves. They're going to go in because the president told them to go in. That's their job. But they're going to go in by themselves. So you're going to now have two police forces working without coordinating with each other. You're going to have the local police who really know the area not helping. And then you're going to have ICE going in, and not only are they going to go look for the targets that they went in for, but anybody else they come across, they're going to arrest as well.
Right.
So you're going to have larger activities of ICE going on. So in the neighborhood where the local police cooperate with ICE, it's safer. ICE doesn't have to go out into the community that they're not familiar with, and less people are picked up.
Right. It's a good point. Yeah. So San Francisco is doing it as we would expect, completely wrong.
Yes.
So,
Well,
there you go. We'll take a break for a minute, and we're going to come back and talk about immigration law generally, and try to help people understand what an immigration attorney does and what we can do for them. So we'll be right back in just a minute.
Whoa, hang on to your hat, folks. More with Warren Nord when we get back. Y'all are back here listening to the White Hat Law Show. Warren, who do we have up next?
All right, welcome back. So in this segment, I want to talk about immigration law. Obviously, an immigration attorney runs into an illegal alien who says, here's a bunch of money, and you're going to make me a legal naturalized citizen in 5 to 10 years, right?
exactly.
No, that's not right. That's not right. We're joking. So what does an immigration do day to day?
So an immigration attorney in day-to-day actually isn't going to interact with illegal aliens, people who enter without inspection, very much, because often there's very little that an attorney can do for them. So most attorneys are going to be looking after people who came on a visa. When they came on a visa, depending on what visa it was, they may or may not have the opportunity. If they're seeking to stay here permanently, they'll be looking for permanent residence. And in that case, we would do a process called adjustment of status. That's probably the most common idea that most people are familiar with. Now, we do a number of other things. We also do change of status, where they're here on one kind of visa, say a visitor, and they like to be a student. Or they're a student and they'd like to switch to an H, or whatever they're changing to, okay? For law enforcement, they may be trying to get a U visa, which would be the police need that person to stay as a witness to help them enforce a crime, okay? So those are the things. Those are all basically, if it's a lettered visa, it's a non-immigrant visa. They're here for some reason that's temporary, and then they leave after the visa entry time expires, and it varies for different visas. If they're seeking an immigrant visa, which means they want to be a permanent resident, they want to live here and eventually move towards citizenship, then it's a different process. That's the change of status, or they come here that way from the consulate overseas. So if they come in illegally, for the most part, they don't have any pathway to permanent residency. For the vast majority of people who enter without inspection, there is no option for green cards. There's no way to get it, even if you get married to a U.S. citizen. Under the right circumstances, it's possible to get a waiver for that entry, so the government will forgive them for that violation if they've only done it once. If they've done it twice, there's no forgiveness.
Well, that's interesting. So, so a person who comes in as an illegal alien has no way currently to ever get right.
Not no, but a very, very small chance.
Very small chance. Now, in the past, we've had migrant workers. I remember under Reagan, we had a migrant worker program.
We did, and Bush tried to bring it back up. It got killed by the Democrats. It's a problem.
That's what we like to do in this program, is bring up problems and point the fingers at the people that we
they did. They killed
cause
it
a
off.
problem.
Bush wanted to put it in place. Now, the argument was you'll create a class of second-class citizens.
Because we don't have that now. That's,
No, because we don't have that now. Being illegal and staying under the radar and hiding in the shadows isn't second class. That's probably third or fourth class. But I'll tell you, there are other people who object to the program for other reasons. So partly because of our 14th Amendment. Unlike most countries, the United States, if you have a baby here, that baby gets to claim citizenship. The rest of the world doesn't have this problem.
Well, it's funny because I did the research on this myself whenever Ted Cruz came up, because, of course, and people talk about McCain before that. Of course, McCain was in Panama, right? Born clearly a United States citizen. The idea that if you're born to U.S. parents, then you're a citizen.
Which is how most of the world does it.
Right. Well, when you go back and do this, the old world, Europe and such, they no longer have birthright citizenship. The new world still does largely, but they're slowly getting rid of it. I think Ireland was the last European country to have birthright citizenship, because they've learned that if you have a welfare system that's very generous, then you can't have a natural birthright citizenship. You have to close your borders. So
most countries historically and today, citizenship is transferred through blood. Right. Very few countries transfer it through soil. And those are the two pathways for citizenship. Now, the U.S. has both.
Right.
So either through blood or soil. Either one will do. The problem is there's no distinction about how you got over that soil.
Right.
To claim the citizenship.
I've always said, look, you have to recognize the sovereignty, right? Otherwise, you can't claim the laws and protection thereof. So if you are here illegally, then it seems to me that by definition, you're not respecting our laws.
And we can do a whole other podcast on that.
We could. We should mention that. There's a couple other things I wanted to mention before we let you go. And by the way, if you need help with immigration, William Stevens is a counsel with our law firm. We'd be happy to set you up. There's a couple of things I always hear about. People say, well, Christians are supposed to be welcoming to the aliens that are within them. And I always say, well, Nehemiah was supposed to build a wall. I remember that. And when they're talking about being kind to the aliens that are the resident aliens, they're referring back to the time when the Israelites were hanging out, being forced to hang out with the Egyptians. Nobody's forcing anybody to come here and then live on the dime. And then the other thing is, well, when I came to you, you clothed me. It's that I have duties to people, and my neighbors have duties, but I don't see in the Bible a moral authority to pull out the gun or a law and say, I'm sorry, theft is normally illegal, but I voted on it and I decided the neighbor on my right should be forced to give compassion to the neighbor on my left. I have a duty, but I don't have a moral authority to make somebody else do that. And of course, again, that's another whole discussion, but this idea that a good Christian will welcome everybody, I always say, look, you can open your house, you can sponsor all the people you want. There are an infinite number of good causes in the world. You don't get to stand up on your horse and say, no, my duty and my charity to this cause is more important than what you're doing with whatever charities you're doing in some other country or some other neighborhood or down the street. There are an infinite number of good causes, and we can all choose to help the ones that we want to help. Anyway, just a little minor rant that I get to do every once in a while. I want to thank my guests, Sheriff Bill Weber,
Thank you.
doing a great job. William Stevens, now of counsel with NORAD Law, but he also has an office in North Dallas, and so there's that. So
Yes, I'm a general practice attorney in Dallas.
so with that, we say adieu, and we'll talk to you next time. Good day from White Hat Law.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we want to thank you for listening to the White Hat Law Show here with Warren Norrid. To find out more about Warren, check him out at norridlaw.com. See you next time.